This is Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're speaking with Carrie King. She is on the global executive team of A4S and leads the firm's capital markets program, which is designed to raise awareness and create action towards a global sustainable financial system. Carrie also manages the company's relationships with asset owners, which is what we will focus on today. Now, prior to working for A4S, Kelly worked within business in the community, the British Embassy Paris, and in the office of now His Majesty King Charles III. So, welcome to the podcast, Carrie.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Your work with board members and trustees of pensions is very in-depth, interest, and undoubtedly interesting to a lot of the people who are listening to the podcast because some of them probably call on them. So, could you say what kind of work you do for them so that we can frame this conversation?
Yeah, of course. So we set up the Asset Owners Network back in 2018 as part of Accounting for Sustainability's remit around encouraging sustainable business being business as usual. And we worked with pension fund chairs, predominantly in the UK to start off with, convening them, bringing them together so that we can give them a, if you like, safe and confidential space to be able to explore the key challenges that they face as pension fund chairs. This provided them with, and still provides them because we've been going since 2018, this provides them with the ability to share knowledge, ask questions of each other, frame this in a way which is both confidential and not commercially focused. So there's no others in the room, it's just the pension fund chairs. And we work with them not only in bringing them together and focusing on particular challenges, but we also look at how we can build resources that are tailored for this audience. So this could be around translating guidance that's out there, practical actions, and putting it in what it means for pension fund chairs. So this could be around, for example, the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures have just launched their recommendations and sector-based guidance. And what we've done is turn that into a top tips for chairs and trustees on what this actually means for them. What are the practical actions that they can take in starting to embed nature into their investment and strategic decisions? And then I'd say the last element to what we do with the Asset Owner Network is we help to amplify a collective pension chair voice on certain areas, whether that voice is directed at investors, companies, or regulators. Recent example is we brought together a collective voice of pension fund chairs around the ISSB consultation, and there was a strong feeling and need by this collective investor voice around enhancing the double materiality aspect of the ISSB's at the time draft standards. So they're a snapshot of what we do at the Asset Owner Network.
Yeah, this is a great contribution to this because the regulatory area often needs a little bit of feedback like that and can't get it very effectively because of the confidentiality issues, which you're also respecting. So that's great. Now, I just wonder in your work with these folks as a whole, what do you think are the main challenges they face in creating and implementing a sustainability plan?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I think when I'm talking about this, my experience working with pension funds is predominantly in the UK. So while the setup and challenges can be quite similar in some jurisdictions, it's not in others. So a lot of my experience and examples will be based on the particular kind of setup that the UK pension sector has. I would say that one of the key challenges is time and knowledge. Chairs are often doing this at the side of their desk. They therefore rely quite rightly on expert knowledge, either in-house or through external service providers. And there has to be that careful balance to delegate, but being able to ensure that the advice and investment decisions being made on their behalf, really truly reflects the investment beliefs that truly reflect the best interests of their beneficiaries. And we work with pensions on where some of those touch points can be to ensure, the engagement, the most effective way to enhance that engagement with investors, advisors, that stewardship side as well. And then also there's no required training. In most cases, there's no required training around sustainability for trustees in this space. So there's a lot of expectation on chairs and trustees to be able to be knowledgeable in this area and to be able to make those decisions with those kind of time and resource constraints that they have.
Yeah, I mean that's true, and that's very interesting. Most of the certifications are built for people who are investment advisors. You
Yeah,
know, I mean,
exactly. And I think the other point, which is quite related to this around the time point, is around, compliance over, for want of a better word, strategic vision.
mhm.
How do you ensure that various compliance exercises are not just, a tick box exercise, but rather they use that the process is being used to answer the so what. So, for example, if you take the TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure regulations that are in place in quite a few jurisdictions now for pension schemes, part of this is to undergo scenario analysis using a few different climate scenarios to understand what implications these scenarios have on, your portfolio in the short, medium, and long term.
Mhm.
And through my work engaging with pension funds, I've heard many stories of pensions saying, this takes so much time and the results are truly shocking, but not what they will be doing with the results and how the results can support a business case to make changes. And I do think that comes down to the time element. Being able to step back is so important, but, it goes against huge constraints of having the time to do this, really.
This makes it all exceptionally difficult to get around. But this kind of leads me to one idea because most of the folks who listen to this podcast are people who are investment advisors, they're investment management consultants, et cetera. I wonder, in and amongst these struggles, do you see particularly good ways that you can advise the folks who are listening to this podcast about how to help trustees and other members of the pension plan to address those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the advisor sector gets, it gets a lot of stick about where they are on this journey. And I think there's something incredibly, expert knowledge sitting with advisors. They have the remit and the resources to invest in these experts. And I do see sustainability teams within advisors growing from, a one man or one woman band to a whole team with reporting lines to, executive team being more direct. So I think, there is a lot of energy, there's a lot of passion out there. I think the examples I feel which are the most positive at the moment is where there has been an active two-way engagement between the pension trustee board and the advisors, that time is made to have this rather than just a simple report and monitor basis. And I think that is where you can really delve into overcoming some of those barriers. To give you an example, data is often lauded as, one of the key barriers to being able to move forward, to be able to report on, for example, a net zero commitment, etc. And I think, I have seen, talking to pension funds and investment consultants, advisors, about how they have worked together to kind of solve that problem. And I'm not saying the problem is necessarily solved, but one of the angles that certainly pension funds are looking at the moment is around how you kind of reassess the need for that data. So if you take data as an example, as an industry, we have grown to expect that robust data supported by sophisticated tools, metrics, will drive our investment decisions. And incomplete complete data and complex metrics present a challenge to this traditional approach. And if you take the example of nature, with the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures guidance coming out, data in the kind of nature space is often less than 5 years old, and related metrics are only starting to emerge. And so there is a fear, and quite a valid fear, that this is going to lead to inaction and avoidance. And we're already seeing how pension funds are working with their advisors on how do we address some of those nature issues. And at the moment, there's some great work and great studies around the kind of narrative approach, taking more narrative approach and qualitative approach to enhance the more kind of traditional quantitative approach to looking at risk management. And so I think some of those examples are starting to happen. And I think the more the more we provide a kind of a space for that kind of two-way engagement between that advisor and pension fund trustee, I think the more we can expect from it. And one thing I say often, and I think people raise their eyebrows at me, but I think there's that being bold enough to be vulnerable in this space. And I know that's probably a bit of a swear word in this, in this kind of framing in the financial sector, but being able to be vulnerable both from an advisor and from a pension fund perspective on not knowing the answers and being directed by the ambition more than by what tools you have currently surrounding you.
Yeah, I mean, I have often quantified that vulnerability with a slightly different, maybe perhaps more palatable word sometimes, which is curious, right? Because we don't have the data yet, but we do have to make this push into this. Shouldn't, instead of a lot of CFA charter holders are exceptionally focused on things we can know through data for the right reasons, right? You're
Yeah.
talking to someone who's a former analyst. I lived that life. But instead of making you scared, shouldn't it make you curious about about how we're going to get through this, how this is going to work out? I think it is a smorgasbord of curiosity if you're so inclined. But great, so you have a lot of resources on your website. Could you direct folks to any particular part of it, perhaps this case study on what the work you all did with Scottish widows, to help them understand more about that?
Yeah, I mean, the resources we have, I would split them into two parts. We have our kind of top tips guides, which are primarily designed for pension fund chairs and trustees. They're relatively short. They're specifically around the role of the chair and trustee. So it's around their kind of a take on their developing their strategy, about the engagement they have across the investment chain, etc., with some top tips from other pension fund chairs. And then we have more detailed case studies, which we work with pension fund chairs, pension funds in total, on different challenges. And that can be around, and we've done that over the years. So some of the examples might feel a bit simplistic now, like how to embed TCFD into your strategy, and this was before we started doing this, before it was mandated in this country. To how do you realize a net zero strategy? How do you embed this into your engagement with your managers? We've done other things around which might be specific to different jurisdictions, around nature, around that kind of stewardship side. We have something which is which is very specific to England, to the UK, which is employee covenants,
Yeah.
and embedding sustainability into the employee covenants. So we've got lots of different areas there, and we've helpfully got a dashboard of all the pension related case studies in there. I would say that amongst all of the pension case studies, there are some commonalities. One would be around just start. It could be start small. It could be start with one example, like top tips on nature is around just start with one risk and one opportunity and work from there. I would also say peer collaboration is a really strong one as well. A lot of these pension funds, they don't have the resources, the big resources like some of the schemes, to be able to dedicate teams to this, and to learn from others that have been able to do it. And we're going to be beginning of the new year working with USS on the work they're doing around new climate scenarios, kind of different models on that, to be able to bake in some of the kind of physical risks and tipping points that that is felt is not necessarily visible in the current scenarios. So we're going to be doing that. We've also got some work around engagement plans and how do you ensure that your stewardship approach actually has an effective escalation plan, and working with the Church of England pension board over here, who recently decided, after years of engagement that had an escalation plan, at the end was the divestment, to finally divest in the oil and gas energy that they had, and just looking more closely at what those escalation plans could look like. So there's lots still in the pipeline, and we're always really keen to know what specific challenges some of your listeners would find helpful.
Yeah, I think that last thing you mentioned will be exceptionally interesting to people in the CFA New York Sketchman Zone, although I know there are a lot of people around the world listening to this podcast. For the folks who are here
Yeah.
and are familiar with the New York City comptroller's move to divest all of oil and gas from all five of the New York City big New York City pension plans, which amounts to assets that are a little shy of CalPERS. I think that, anyone who is an advisor who worked with them through that process, which was bumpy to say the least, would be exceptionally interested in reading about how that has worked for other pensions, because it's just a really interesting, burgeoning area. So, well, Carrie, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here, giving everyone a line into what A4S is doing. And folks, do go out and check out their website. There are a lot of materials on there and a lot of good case studies that can help evolve your thinking. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. There was actually one more thing I wanted to say. I don't know if we can
Sure, just go for it. Yep,
do that.
just say.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Rob, for that. That's really helpful, and it's been great talking to you. One thing I should mention is I mentioned earlier that we predominantly work with the UK pension funds at the moment. We will be in the new year launching a European chapter of our asset owner network, working with pension fund chairs and equivalent in the mainland Europe. So more to come on that very shortly.
Oh, great. Well, will everyone keep your web browsers tuned to A4S and they'll find out when that happens and how it happens. So thanks again.
Thanks, Rob.